All right, hello everybody. Today we've got Mammoths at the Gates. This is another one of the um, Cleric Chi series with from Nghi Vo. Um, and honestly, Into the Riverlands was better. Um, this one is it's one of those things, right? Where there's where it's like this is kind of the problem I have with like literary fantasy, literary science fiction is that all the interesting world building stuff takes an absolute backseat to like the life lesson that we're supposed to learn from this thing. And it's mildly interesting. It's kind of like this idea about like grieving about a dead person, and the fact that these clerics, they live two lives basically, right? They live one as a regular person, and then they live another one as like a history cleric or history monk or whatever, right? Um, there's a bit more about their magical, photographic memory birds. There's an interesting development at the very end with so just kind of a synopsis of the start of the plot. I don't want to necessarily spoil the whole thing, but Cleric Chi returns after wandering for a while, finds that one of the other clerics, Thien, has died, and there are two people who are at the gates with these giant royal mammoths. It's another one of those things where like, yeah, royal mammoths are cool, and that's a neat idea, and having like war machines. Well, first off, there's a point in the story where they call the mammoth a war machine, which is completely out of like there's no other machinery in this world, so to speak. I mean, there probably is, but you know what I mean. Like people wouldn't necessarily think of a war machine because there aren't tanks, right? That's where we get the idea of a war machine, is that we have like a tank with an internal combustion engine and it's a machine. You know, it would make more sense for them to call it like a steed or a you know uh, or like an animal, right? Like a there are words for these things, and for some reason they chose war machine instead, and which is just kind of strange. But basically, these two people are the granddaughters of the cleric who died, and they want his body back. Um, and there's kind of this little bit of back and forth. There's a thing where they like burn essence of hot peppers, and they use that to mess with the mammoths, kind of thing, and they're like threatening to knock down their gates and maybe knock down their archives, and so the thrust of the story is about them like basically kind of trying to try to mix these two things together and have like a funeral for Cleric Thien that is both appropriate for his granddaughters and for the clerics, right? And it becomes clear here that the whole like neuter pronoun cleric thing is really there just to click to check a box. Like you can see that the clerics don't actually kind of believe it, and that nobody else does either. It's just kind of a way to, in a meta sense, it's just a way to like add mystery to these characters, and then in a non-meta sense, it's just a way for them to like have an excuse to use pronouns as a bludgeon, which is stupid. Um, Unlike Into the Riverlands, there's no cool kung fu fight in this one. There's not really a whole lot of interesting action at all. There's they irritate the mammoths, and then they invite them in to like do this talking ceremony, which is apparently what you do when one of these clerics dies, and people just tell stories about the cleric, and they have a candle and they blow it out, and it's all very mysterious and mystical, but really it's just a bunch of people telling stories about someone who died. Um, and then, of course, the conflict in the story is that one of these stories is, negative, and like one of his granddaughters is like, "Oh, strike it from the record," and the bird's like, "No, we have photographic memories. We can't. That's not a thing we can do." And then there's some magic, and there's kind of an interesting conclusion where it kind of works for everybody. You know what I mean? Um, But other than that, there's not a whole lot that happens in this story. Just a lot of flashbacks to like this cleric, the end character, when he was still alive, and like how he interacted with the other clerics and granddaughters and wife and etc. Because the granddaughters have never met him, I guess, right? That's the point. Is that he became a cleric before these granddaughters existed. So they only have stories of him as well. And that's kind of an interesting idea from a literary perspective, but it's executed kind of, decently, I guess. Not terrible. But the I don't know. It's not as fun as Into the Riverlands, and therefore it fails to be interesting as a story. There's kind of a little bit of a good emotional hit with the stories of the character conflicting and like, they said he did this and this person's angry, and that kind of gets you a little bit, but at the same time, the whole idea of it is kind of because like there's no clear reason why these clerics necessarily have to like throw away their whole like past life. It's just there for the color, right? Because the magic birds are the photographic memory ones, and everything else they just write down. There's an interesting line early on that like a story should be. Hold on, let me find this real quick. This is like the one interesting thing that I remember from this story was here it is. The underground most of Cleric Thien's collection would be absorbed back into the body of the main archives. Before that, given how thick some of the dust was, there should also be an evaluation as to whether the materials in question were historical, relevant, or truthful. The underground archives were enormous, but they weren't endless, and to earn their place, materials needed to be one or two of those things, and ideally all three. So, the three things are historical, relevant, and truthful. And so the stories, in order to be interesting, don't necessarily need to be truthful. Which is interesting for like a historical body, right? It mixes history with folklore, which, I guess there's something to be said about that, but as far as I can tell, it just means that their history books can't actually be trusted to actually be truthful. Which is kind of damning for a group that, has magical photographic memory birds. So, I think, again, Mammoths at the Gates, definitely not as good as Into the Riverlands. Definitely more of the kind of like, we're going to be woke about this thing kind of thing going on in here. Interesting conclusion that is kind of weird. It's one of those things where there's like, there's not a lot of magic in the world, but I guess there is here or something like that. I'm not sure exactly how it works. It's not like, it's very... it's got a very, this is a novel solution to this situation ending, which has a little bit of appeal to it, but like the rest of the story, there's not much going on, honestly. So yeah, that is my kind of sort of partial, kind of sort of review of Mammoths at the Gates. I think I'm probably done with this series. I was hoping that because Into the Riverlands, there was just the annoyingness of the they-them being used for singular people, and it being very confusing in the writing sometimes. That was really the only element of real wokeness that was in there. There was also like a little bit of like this beautiful character is actually a man kind of thing. But like, there was a cool kung fu fight. There were some adventures. There was a bunch of evil bandits Into the Riverlands, and that was kind of a fun story to actually read. This one, on the other hand, is like it's just trying too hard, I would say, and there's more of the we have thrown away our manness or womanness as clerics thing, but there's no reasoning behind it. And I was thinking that if they were going to be more assertive about it, they would give more reasoning behind it, but there's none. And like the clerics themselves don't even really believe it. One of the clerics is like, "Oh, call me uncle," right? When nobody's around in this book. And so it's like, it's one of those things where like the characters are being forced into this box where even the characters themselves don't believe they fit into this box. So I don't know. That strikes me as a little bit disingenuous, perhaps, which kind of hurts the rest of the story. Anyway, that is today's video. Mammoths at the Gates. Into the Riverlands was a better story, more fun story, more interesting story with less preachiness at you. This one gets into preachy snipe right at the very end, which I found irritating as well, because it's not necessary. But yeah, you know, good to sometimes read things that you don't like, to figure out why you don't like them, and to kind of dissect them a little bit. And it's also good to kind of, you know, at least try to see the other side a little bit and like understand why it doesn't work for you, right? Like the disingenuousness of it really gets to me. Like they haven't actually, the characters who are, you know, they-theming themselves don't actually believe that themselves, which means that the author put them there to check a box for, you know, editors at woke magazines to read and say, ooh, it's got this box checked. And that's all I've got for that. So, yeah. I would say not a recommend. I would say if you want to try out this series, try out Into the Riverlands. Superior story. More fun. More interesting. Less preachy. And, you know, more reminiscent of, like, old school kung fu TV shows. Whereas this is just kind of depressing and preachy. Let's see. And that'll do it. Yeah. So, that's all I've got for you guys for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to support the channel, you know what to do. Otherwise, I'll say have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Okay, a little addendum here. The review of Mammoths at the Gate was a little depressing, I felt. And so we're going to do something a little funny here. Right at the end, you know, if you managed to catch this, good for you. I recently bought a like a frozen meal pack that was supposed to be Thai style drunken noodles. It was from a company called like Authentic Thailand. I guess it's Authentic Asian, and it comes in like a little red box. You know, like you might get Chinese food in. And I'll put a picture up over my stupid face so that you can see the exact product that I'm talking about. These, let me be clear here. Every time I go to a Thai restaurant, one of the things I try, and like my first or second visit, is drunken noodles. I love drunken noodles at every Thai restaurant that I've ever gotten it from. These noodles were disgusting. They somehow managed to make snow snap peas gross, and I don't know how you managed to do that. Like, they sucked all the freshness out of them and turned them into these little desiccated, dark green, gross, disgusting little shriveled things that tasted like salt and pain. No, not pain. Because, like, it says it's hot on the box, but it wasn't actually that spicy. It was more salty, and it had this disgusting, foul, rotten flavor to it. I don't know what the hell they did, but it's like they took something, like they took a sauce that's supposed to have some oyster sauce in it, and they just made it all oyster sauce. So it was super salty and super gross. And like the noodles weren't even very tasty. No, the texture of the noodles wasn't even that good. The whole meal was disgusting. It was so bad that I just threw it away. So if you see this at the grocery store and you say, I like drunken noodles, do not buy. because holy cow, these were disgusting. And if you do buy them and you discover how disgusting, if you do buy them because you want to prove me wrong, let me know in the comments. That's what I've got for you today. So once again, thanks, and I'll see you tomorrow.